previous lecture, we talked about love as a virtue. That is, as a defining personal characteristic that shapes the identity of Christians. Now we turn our focus to conduct, and we concern ourselves with the question as to what a loving person actually does. What does love as a principle of action require us to do? In the introduction to the previous lecture, I noted that Jesus defined love as doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Philosophers suggest that such a principle is really a formal principle as opposed to a substantive one. This means it doesn't actually tell us what to do. It only tells us how to think about what we should do. In trying to figure out what I should do, I should think about how I would want to be treated if the situation were reversed. One doesn't have to think very long or very hard to realize that despite the formality of the idea that we should treat others as we want to be treated, despite its lack of substance, if you will, it is highly suggestive. Consider the parable of the Good Samaritan that Jesus told to illustrate love. The Samaritan's loving character was displayed in helpful and appropriate actions. The parable suggests that if you or I were injured and wounded along the road, we would want someone who was in a position to help, as the Samaritan was, to actually help us. Therefore, if we are in a position to help someone whose life is in danger, we should help. You or I probably don't want to be mugged in the first place, so we shouldn't mug people. If you or I were refugees as a result of a civil war, the way millions of people are now because of the civil war in Syria, for example, we would want those who were in a position to help and able to help to actually help us. The idea of treating others as we would want to be treated also suggests that we should respect others. We want people to respect us, therefore we should respect others. We should not talk about them behind their backs. We should not tell lies about them. We wouldn't want them to tell lies about us or talk about us behind our backs. We would feel disrespected. If I work for someone, I would want to be paid a fair wage, a wage that I am able to live on. Therefore, we should pay those who work for us a fair wage, a living wage. If someone disagrees with us, we want them to explain their disagreement in a respectful manner without humiliating us. Therefore, when we disagree with others, we should explain our disagreement with them respectfully, without humiliating them or calling them names. A significant aspect of the respect with which we want to be treated, it seems, is to have our capacity to think, choose, value, and act for ourselves respected. None of us wants to be coerced or manipulated by those who disagree with us. Rather, we want to be able to do what we think is best based on our own understanding of the situation. That doesn't mean that we are offended or disrespected when others respectfully explain to us why they think what we think is wrong or why they think what we are doing is wrong, or if they give us reasons to think or act differently. But when we are coerced or forced to act in a way that others think we should, when we are manipulated by being lied to, for example, we feel justifiably disrespected. Therefore, we should not coerce or manipulate other people, not if we are obligated to love others, to treat others as we would want to be treated ourselves. Three things suggest significant complications or limitations with respect to the idea that love requires us to treat others as we would want to be treated. What I'm referring to are situations in which do unto others may not give us helpful or appropriate advice. The first has to do with situations in which our behavior affects more than one person. The second has to do with the possibility of someone wanting our cooperation in something that is itself immoral. The third has to do with when someone wants something and our cooperation in securing it that isn't really good for them or isn't good for any human being. Let's consider first a situation in which your behavior affects more than one person. Consider a situation in which a friend, for example, Bud, has told you some information in confidence based on your promise to keep that information secret. However, another friend, Joey, is about to make a significant decision, and without that information which you know in confidence, he is likely to make a very bad decision. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize that the idea that you should do the loving thing, the idea that you should treat others, both Bud and Joey, the way you would want to be treated, isn't very helpful in this situation. Bud would surely want you to keep that information confidential, as you promised. Joey, however, would clearly want you to reveal the information, since without it, he's liable to make a very bad decision. So what does love require you to do? What is the loving thing? What does it mean in such a situation to treat others as you would want to be treated yourself? Consider the following scenario suggested by the eminent Western philosopher Immanuel Kant, who also happened to be a Lutheran Christian. It's a situation where your behavior affects two people, and in which one of them is asking you to cooperate in something immoral. Suppose that you are allowing Pedro to hide in your basement because he is afraid of Samuel, who he thinks is trying to kill him. Samuel appears at your door and asks you if Pedro is hiding in your basement. You should do the loving thing. You should treat others as they would want to be treated. Now, Pedro would clearly prefer that you lie to Samuel and say to him, I haven't seen Pedro. In fact, the last time I saw him, he was headed towards the airport where he's flying to Beijing. If you hurry up, you might be able to catch him. Of course, Samuel wants you to tell him the truth. To treat him as you would want to be treated would probably mean telling him the truth. The problem is, telling him the truth would be cooperating with him in the pursuit of something highly immoral, the killing of Pedro. Surely, love does not require you to cooperate with others when they are trying to accomplish something immoral. Let's broaden the perspective a bit. Imagine that I am basically a good and loving person, but that I am momentarily enraged for whatever reason, and in that rage I am seeking to murder another person. In my normal state of mind, of course, I wouldn't be doing that. Now, what would I want from you if I appeared at your door seeking the truth about the whereabouts of the person that I'm trying to murder in my momentary rage? One can imagine us saying, well, in such a situation, I would hope that you would deceive me. I would hope you would do whatever you could within limits to keep me from carrying out my momentary murderous intention. Of course, let's imagine that I'm not a good person at all. And in fact, I would not want to be deceived in that moment because I would consistently want to carry out my murderous intentions. Well, then in that situation, I suppose I would want to be told the truth. Now, I think all of us can probably agree that we should not tell the truth to the person at the door seeking to murder the person in our basement. The point I'm trying to illustrate here is that the idea that love means treating others as you would want to be treated doesn't necessarily lead to that conclusion. Consider a third complication relating to treating others as we would want to be treated ourselves. Think about a situation in which a person is seeking your cooperation in something that isn't necessarily immoral, but surely involves them in the pursuit of some end or goal or purpose that isn't really good for them or any human being. Think about a friend who is seeking a career in the arts, but he or she really, truthfully lacks the talent necessary for a successful or satisfying career. Should you cooperate with their attempts to pursue such a career? Or would you be treating them more lovingly by showing them what an inappropriate pursuit they were engaged in? Or imagine a friend who is a fellow Christian, who is seeking a career that you believe to be inconsistent with a person's calling or vocation as a Christian. Should you help them, cooperate with them as they would wish in the pursuit of that career you believe to be inappropriate? Surely in either such scenario, if you refuse to cooperate, it would seem to require you to explain to them why you are not cooperating. Any of us would want that explanation, wouldn't we? These situations raise again the difficult question of the relationship between love and respect for autonomy. Surely our capacity to think, value, choose, and act for ourselves is very important to us. We don't want to be coerced or manipulated, and generally we want others to cooperate with us in the choices that we make. But surely, being aware of our fallibility, we would also want to be corrected when we are wrong. We would want, if we were the murderer at the door, possibly, to be deceived or to be talked out of our murderous intention. If we are pursuing a career for which we lack the talent, surely we would want those who love us to try to show us a better way. Of course, sometimes love may well mean simply stepping out of the way and letting others make their own mistakes. When should we interfere? When should we even deceive? When should we try to convince others that they are wrong? And when does love require us to simply step out of the way? It's a difficult question. An interesting debate among Christian thinkers has to do with whether or not additional, more substantive principles and rules are necessary for spelling out what conduct is consistent with love. Or were the Beatles right more than a half-century ago when they sang, "All you need is love"? Joseph Fletcher caused quite a stir with his book, Situation Ethics, at about the same time the Beatles were singing, in which he advocated love as a single universal norm for human conduct derived from the biblical revelation. According to Fletcher, what each of us should do in every situation is whatever best promotes human welfare. He was critical of what he called legalism, an approach that regards other, more specific rules, especially biblical ones, as having the same absolute authority as the principle of love. There is surely something attractive and right about Fletcher's perspective. We have probably all known people who have seemed more concerned to obey the rules than to actually care about other people, as love requires. We have all probably faced situations in which simply going by the rules didn't seem to fulfill our responsibilities to others, especially if we are to treat them as we would want to be treated. Love surely requires us to promote human welfare, and that surely means we must pay attention to the consequences of our actions. All that is surely right, and Fletcher was right to remind us of it. Still, we might wonder, may we use any means or do any action or break any rule so long as the end or consequences we intend and reasonably expect involve making people better off? Is the loving thing to do whatever promotes human welfare, even if that requires me to do something seemingly unloving, something that violates some rule we generally think it wrong to break? May I lie to keep from hurting someone's feelings? Is torture justified in an attempt to gain information that may save hundreds of lives? May we execute people accused of murder in order to deter others from murdering? That would surely promote human welfare. Are governments justified when they move people out of their homes and property against their will in order to build highways or airports that they think will promote the overall welfare of their citizens? All this points to a distinction that moral philosophers make between consequentialist and deontological approaches to moral reasoning or morality. The consequentialist says the ends always justify the means, because the only thing that makes any action right or consistent with love is its overall consequences for human welfare. So love requires us to lie to the murderer at the door, maybe even to torture if necessary, to take people's homes away if we have to build an airport that helps everyone. Deontologists disagree. They say that actions have certain inherent features that are relevant to determining whether they are right or wrong, loving or unloving. From a deontological perspective, it isn't true that love is the only valid moral principle or that love is all you need. On the basis of the idea that actions have inherent features that make them by nature loving or unloving, the deontologist would find other principles or rules important for defining or spelling out conduct that is, by its very nature or inherently, unloving, such as lying, killing, torturing, for example. My own view is a deontological one. That is, it seems to me that inherent features of our actions do matter in moral judgment. Actions that hurt or kill or deceive or involve the breaking of promises are unloving or inconsistent with love and therefore seriously morally problematic, even when we may reasonably expect such actions to produce good consequences or to enable us to avoid horrible ones. My view is moderately deontological in that it seems to me that love does mean that I must always carefully consider the consequences of my actions and how they affect human welfare. And there may well be times, it seems to me, when one is justified in doing something inherently unloving, something that breaks a valid rule, in the expectation that it will produce good consequences, because love also requires me to attend to those. There are four things to consider, however. First, is the unloving action absolutely necessary to the good end that I'm trying to achieve? Is there no other way to create those good consequences apart from the questionable action? Secondly, just how profound or significant is the violation that I am contemplating? The more profound or significant the violation, the harder it is to justify. For example, I'm inclined to believe that torture is never justified because it is about the most horrible, abhorrent thing one human being can do to another. Third, how profound or significant, how morally compelling is the good consequences or the end I am seeking through my questionable action? If it involves the avoidance of a severe, serious moral evil, like the loss of many lives, or if it involves a significant improvement in human welfare, it may well be justified. Finally, then, one must ask, how probable is it that the good consequence I seek or the horrible consequence I seek to avoid, how probable is it that that will actually result from the action in question? The higher the probability, the more likely it is to be justified. The lower the probability, the more difficult it is to justify. I am convinced that a consequentialist approach, an approach like Fletcher's, one that says the ends always justify the means, is wrong for a variety of reasons. First, it seems to me that consequentialism produces judgments that violate our moral common sense. Consider this. From a consequentialist perspective, it would be okay for me to steal $500 from a wealthy person in order to give it to a soup kitchen or to someone that served homeless people, because surely overall human welfare would be increased by so doing. But that just seems wrong. There is something inherently wrong about stealing that is ignored by consequentialism. Secondly, consequentialism is wrong because it seems to require us to know more about the consequences of our actions than it's actually possible for us to know. In any really complex or difficult situation, the consequences of our actions are almost impossible to predict. And a part of the reason for that is that the overall consequences of our actions often depend upon the reactions of others to the action we take. And not simply does that make the consequences difficult to predict, it means that we are giving equal responsibility to ourselves for what happens as a result of other people's reactions as we are to the consequences of our own actions. Finally, the reality of human sinfulness and its impact on our judgments and perceptions means that I don't trust either our accounts of our intentions or our attempts to predict the consequences of our action. Put differently, I fear that a consequentialist approach gives fallen and sinful human beings far too much leeway for suspending traditional rules of conduct than is merited. So let me summarize what we've said about love. Love is surely the fundamental principle of Christian conduct, just as it is the essential virtue of a Christian. Love means to treat others as we would want to be treated ourselves, and this is surely evocative and profound. But this alone cannot and does not define love. Treating others as we would want to be treated may involve non-interference or even cooperation with others' choices, even when we disagree with them, since a part of what treating others as we would want to be treated means is respect for personal autonomy. Love surely requires us to attend to the overall consequences of our actions, whether or not they in fact produce human welfare. But love does not mean that we can do just anything to promote human welfare. Some actions are inherently unloving. All of this means that we may need to supplement the principle of love with other rules that define inherently unloving actions. Love is important, but love isn't all that we need to define even what love means. This concludes our discussion of love as a principle of conduct. In our next lectures, we will look at another principle, the principle of justice.